Hi, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Kathryne May. I like to go by Kat or Kat May. Um, you see next to me Miss Amanda Winstead. She is an author who has currently two books out called Fate of the Fallen and Warriors of Wrath. This is a duology series. I recommend both. You don't know who I am, but I am currently working to complete my first novel, the first of a duology. Um, and I would just like to welcome to this interview, Amanda. How now? Do you go by Amanda or
Yes,
A.E.
I do.
Winstead or Miss Winstead, Mrs. Winstead?
Yes, I do. I go by Amanda. Uh that's just my name, and I chose to to publish under the AE Winstead just because of my work. I have a public job, and I didn't want people to Google me and be confused.
Yeah, I could appreciate that. Well, before we really dive into things, as I stated, I am getting ready. I am a whole lot closer to getting to the final stages of pulling everything together and getting everything ready, print ready, and finalizing the cover and stuff like that. Currently in chapter 20, I have 23 chapters, which may end up being more once I really lay it out and have a professional editor look at my work. Um, but because I'm getting so close, and because I have enjoyed both your books, but primarily because you are the person who, after 20 some years, I started my journey 20 some years ago, and due to my own personal issues, the book took a back shelf, literally. And but getting on TikTok, I was relatively new. So I can't really say it was the algorithm that put you on my For You page, because I certainly wasn't doing any TikTok. I didn't know about TikTok, authors of TikTok or anything like that.
Right.
But so I just happened to stumble across you, and you were in your journey of writing Fate of the Fallen, and watching you, following you, really guilted me for myself of, you have a book, you need to get back writing. My small
Yeah.
children were now adults.
Right.
I had no more excuses. There was no next thing for
Right.
me, and for me that's like a death sentence, so there has to be a next thing.
Yeah.
And you inspired me, so thank you. And this is one reason why I wanted to connect with you. The other is because I love the series, and I would love to see people migrate and enjoy your work. And
Thank
I think
you.
you're also working on a third one. Well, hopefully we can talk about all of that.
Yes. 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 It
So
is. I am working on a book right now. It's not part of the same universe. There, it's probably a whole different genre even. So, but yeah, we can talk about that for sure.
yeah. So how did you conceive Fate of the Fallen? I mean, the whole series. I mean, how did you wake
Well,
up just one day and
I started writing. I've always written, even throughout high school, just like poetry and things like that. Never ever dreamed that anybody would ever read any of it. Just my own,
Mhm.
um, process, processing things. And I was in my children were young. I started a blog. That's kind of how I people started reading the things that I was writing, and then obviously just loving to read, reading so many books. And I would say to my husband, so often, "Yeah, I think I could do this. Like I could write a book, and he encouraged me for years, probably before I actually thought, okay, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to try it, see what happens, see what I can come up with. And the first thing, the first thing I knew that I had to do was have a good idea, like come up with a story that I really could get excited about. And I think at the time I was reading a lot of fantasy, celestial fantasy type books, books about angels. But they were, obvious. And my book is YA also. And that's what I mostly enjoy reading. And so I think that was the inspiration that, where I kind of like came up with my own little ideas. My thing, I mean, as I was reading these books, these are traditionally published books, so they're not, and they're not Christian books. So I'm reading these books about these angels, and I'm just thinking that's not like that. It was always in my mind, like I wanted to write something that was more. I'm not going to say factual because angels are kind of almost like a mythical type of a creature, but
Right.
um,
Definitely a
they
belief structure.
right. I wanted to write them more biblically based, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so that's where the idea came from.
Okay. Okay. So you know the time it takes to write a book. Like, how long did it take you to write your first
From
one?
the time I decided I was going to write it, and I started Googling how to write a novel until it was published, was 6 years.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. So,
Yeah, I mean, so that 6 year period, I wasn't writing that whole time. My kids were young, and my son was playing baseball, and we were, I would take months off at a time, especially during the busy. You've got
yeah.
kids. One kid's going this way, one kid's going that way, and you're just trying to figure
Yeah.
out when you're going to have time to eat dinner. So, and then there was a lot of times too. I would get stuck on a plot point, and I'd be like, okay, well, what's going to happen now? And it would take me a month to figure out what's the next thing. So, yeah, there were a lot of breaks in that period of time. But there was always, I think one thing I've heard, just from other writers, I think that it is kind of unusual to like have an idea, and your first idea, and that's the one you actually finish writing. A lot of people, I think, maybe get tired of this story and they start something new, and or they get to a point where they get stuck on something, so they just start writing something else. I never did that. I always just came back to the story, and it if I when I did take those breaks, it was almost like they were in my mind, just like, hey, we're over here, don't forget about us, like. So I always had that pull to come back to that, and I always found a way to do that.
I can so totally identify because I know when I started writing, I was writing on these huge, like 3x4 or 2x4 poster board kind of paper, cardstock.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And at the time, the gentleman who was my mentor at the time was like, this way you get the most of, and I was physically handwriting. Well, that was like 2001. Point is when I was moving, I would be grabbing this cardstock, and that's when my characters were like, "Hey, we're still here. We want to be finished.
Yeah.
Hello." So I can identify with your characters living in your head
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
being there. They were not, and like I said, when I came upon you in TikTok, it was, they were like, and just sort of, tapping their fingers on the desk when you getting back. It's
Right,
time.
right, right.
So I can identify. Um, do you feel like, other than Google, did you have anybody to turn to and to get you through all this?
Not for many, many, many years. Not until I got to the point that I thought I had done the most I could do with the story. It
Mm-hmm.
was the best I could get it. Uh, and I reached out to some beta readers. And that was probably maybe 2 years before it was published. So the first several years, I had I had Google, I had YouTube, and that was it. um, I didn't know any other writers. I didn't really. I mean, there. I don't even know if TikTok was a thing at that point, or I mean, I guess I don't know. YouTube was the only kind of
Yeah.
social media type thing that I thought to even look for other authors. So, and there are a lot of authors on YouTube, that offer tips, videos, and how to type things. And that's where I learned most of the things that I uh, knew about
Mm-hmm.
writing. And then that's kind of how I started my TikTok. I thought, TikTok was kind of, I started in 2020, and I don't know when the app came out, but I think that's when it really got popular. And I just thought maybe I can take some of the things I've learned and put them in kind of like short form videos. Because these YouTube videos I was watching were, like 30, 45-minute long videos. And um, so that's what, I just wanted to help other people where I hadn't really had that to go to.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think TikTok, I know in 2019, 2018, 2019, I was living in an apartment and my daughter was doing TikTok at that time. So I can
Okay.
kind of date when it came into my life.
I do remember that my kids had TikTok before a while, months or maybe a year or two before
Right.
I ever even thought to download the app. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know it was around for a little while before 2020, but and we're just at home and
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a kid thing and
yes, yeah.
and then everybody started uh catching on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's see. One of my, I guess when it came to writing your book, do you feel like you followed a format? Because I know there's a formula about so many percent, so many whatever into your book. You better be hitting the climax and then, or the high point, and then working towards the end. And I personally cannot fit with what I'm writing. And I, you know, I haven't sent it to an editor, so I don't know. But I feel like I have to tell my story. I mean, this story has lived in me for over 20 years, and I've got to develop the character. I've got to develop the plot line. There's the major plot line, then there's all these other subplot lines, these twists that, like, my book is going to be tame. My first book is going to be tame compared to the second one, which is when everything starts popping off. Not that I'm not baiting people in the first one, but the second one, I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the second one, but I know that's where everything is going to get revealed and a lot of the
Right.
backstory gets told, and or at least,
Yeah.
comes to light.
Right.
And so between your two, like, how did you feel comfortable to talk about, or did you feel comfortable talking about any of your plot lines, especially, like, would you do today what you did 3 years ago in talking about your story, and for fear that somebody might take your idea and AI it, and you know
Honestly, that was not a huge fear at the time. It would be
yeah,
now,
yeah.
just because I know a lot more now about it. I think I was very naive when I first started sharing my story with people, beta readers, and I haven't, I mean, goodness, my book could probably be out there on pirating sites. I have not even checked because I don't want to know. Like, there's really nothing you can do about it if it is, but I feel like I was very blessed with the beta readers that I did have. The people, and I'll say beta readers, I think we kind of called ourselves critique partners because they were other writers who we would share work, and I would read a chapter of theirs, they would read mine, and we would kind of share our thoughts with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt a little safer in that there's just that mutual respect. You're not going to do that to me. I'm not going to do that to you. Like, there's no reason. We're both working on our own things.
Right.
And um, so in that, like I said, I feel like I was very blessed with the ones that did choose to work with me, because they gave me some of the most amazing feedback, and my books would not be what they are without that. But with the second book, I actually did not do beta readers, because at that point in time, I was at the point to be like, I was more knowledgeable about, oh, I probably shouldn't just be sending this just to anybody. And I had an editor, from my first book, and she did developmental edits. So I said, I'm just going to let her tell me the things that need to be tweaked, and kind of skip that part of it, with just sending my work to random people. So, if that answers your question.
I think it does. I think so. Basically, you would do things differently now
Yeah, yes,
compared to the first one.
right. The first one, I feel like I was, well, I'm not going to say I feel like I was on my own. I was, once I started working with other people, it was kind of like you kind of realize how many people there are to help you. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't realize it at first, before I started reaching out. I was in critique groups on Facebook. And maybe it was just me at the time. I feel like I really looked out with the people that I did reach out to. Um, were so nice and so helpful. Everybody just seemed to be very willing to help other writers in their journeys. And I don't know. I don't know if it's the same today. I haven't, it's been a while since I've done anything like that, but I would hope it would be.
Right. Yeah, that's see, that would be, I would have to, if I'm this paranoid that I think that I would have to send, you know, a lawyer created document that the person who's reading before I even sent them my work would swear and
Right.
attest to the fact that they would not.
Well, honestly, at this point, like the book that I'm working on now, I'm probably not going to do the whole beta reader thing. I'm to the point where I would just rather pay somebody to give me a developmental edit than to risk it being,
Right.
um, getting into the wrong hands, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So, um, okay, so we talked a little bit about your motivation, and I know when you were promoting your second book, how long do you think you spent, like when you finished Fate of the Fallen, did you just simply keep writing and just this is my cutoff point or for book one and
So, what's funny about that is I didn't know that this was going to be two books when I first started writing it. I knew the story that I wanted to tell. I knew how I
mm-hmm,
wanted to, you know, how much time was going to elapse in the book. But when I got to the point at the end of book one, the very last chapter, I'm just writing. And I'm one of those people who I kind of edit as I go.
mm-hmm.
I can't leave it a mess and just move on. Um, I have to clean it up as much as I can, and then I can continue on. So by the time I got to that, what ended up being the last chapter of book one, I finished the chapter and I thought, this sounds like an ending. And so I looked at my word count and I was probably at like 92,000 words. And I just Googled, how long is YA fantasy novel. And I think I got some answer, like maybe like a roundabout. It was close enough. So
Yeah.
I I kind of panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm done. I think this is it. And I texted my friend and I was like, Amanda, I think I finished my book. My best friend's name is also Amanda. Um, um, but I mean, I knew, so I was like, okay, so it's going to be a duology. All right. So that was how, you see how I was so, I don't know if naive is the word to use in that situation, but I was just so unfamiliar with how to write a book. I just was kind of winging it with the first one. And
All I know is that there are words and chapters. That's it. I made my chapters change when and this is why I say I have 23 chapters now, but it could grow, not because I have more to write, but because my chapters are, and you talk about word count, um, when I finished chapter 23, I was at 220,000.
wow.
Yes, I'm now down below that with my revisions. But, and this is why I'm choosing to self-publish, because I am developing my character. I've got a very intricate plot line. And it takes time. It takes time. Now, that being said, unlike you, my first draft and my second draft are very pukish. they're very they're very like, yeah, she knows how to write. What? And
Oh,
I'm a
yeah.
technical writer. I mean, it's just, which is, very formatted and very dry and dull, and I forgot some words. My vocabulary is coming back because of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And a matter of fact, I kind of know, as I'm working through my revisions, it's like I'm in chapter 20. I'm almost done. I'll be finished chapter 20 tonight. But I know somewhere between chapter 1 and chapter 14, I'm editing differently from 14 on than I did from 1 to 14. So it's like, oh my God, now I got to go back to 1 and kind of make sure
Yeah.
it blends
Yes. Yeah.
correctly. And um,
I know
but
exactly what you mean.
and I would erase, I would delete so many not unnecessary. I think it's necessary. I think it's nice filler, but that's just it. It's filler. And it got somewhere between 14 to 16, I got to the point of, oh my God, these readers are going to be hurting their brains. No, this can go, this can go. It's nice, but it doesn't need to be there. They won't miss it. I'll miss
Right.
it, but they won't miss it. It's okay. So I've had to do a lot of self-talk and work my way through a lot of this. So, I mean,
I know there were things like you said, like sections or paragraphs or descriptions or things that I wanted to be in there. And in my mind, I was like, I know this doesn't need to be here, but I can't cut it just yet. So I
right.
would just keep pushing it off. Like I would move it to the end or move it to the end of the chapter. And it's like, until I could work it out in my mind that, like, okay, this is for the best before I could actually like cut it completely out. I'd have to I'd have to get used to the idea for a while before I was
Yeah.
comfortable doing that. But
Yeah. I even went through, and I was getting ready to do a workshop, as a participant, not as the giver. And I could submit like the first 500 words of my first chapter. Well, it took me 600 and some words, but once I got through editing that, I got it down to 500. The problem is after I submitted it, and I thought it was improved, and I was like, I was really sold on it. And then several months went by, and I went back and read the original version, and it was like, no, I like this so much better.
yeah, yeah,
So I've got that 500 off to the side, but yeah, I know I need to rework that first couple of chapters, but it's there is, so my point to multiple chapters is like I have my chapters are long depending on what's going on, but everything when I change the POV, which for people who may not know means point of view, when I change that, I understand that could be an entirely new chapter. The problem is everything is subject related. Like there
Mhm.
is everything's in the one chapter regardless of point of view because somehow it's all tied in.
Mhm.
Where like with you and your first one, I thought it was masterful. Chapter 1, you
Yeah.
introduce the angels. Chapter 2, you introduce the humans. Chapter 3, you're back on the angel timeline. Chapter 4, your human timeline. And you follow it and follow it and follow it. And dare I say, do I spoil alert people or should I just keep it, anyway, it just what I thought was going to happen after a while I could see it happening, and that's what did, but the very last chapter is what totally threw me, but it was a great bait for book 2, and I was just like, dang, that was good. I'm like, now I want book 2. I got to finish this. So I patiently waited, and it still took me a while to read it, but
Well,
yeah.
one thing you asked this earlier. One thing I wish I would have done differently. I wish I would have, and I kind of go back and forth on this because I feel like when I think the first book wouldn't have been as successful if I had not have released it when I did. But I wish I would have waited, on the other hand, until I was closer to being finished with book 2, because
Hmm.
like I said, I was writing, I was editing as I was writing. So book 1 was close to being finished, when
Hmm.
I got to the point, but I hadn't really written anything past that point. So I knew what was going to happen, but as far as knowing it in your mind and writing it on the paper is a completely different thing. So I did not think that it would take me as long to finish the story as it did. And then I had people, that read the first one and they were like, "When is the second book? When are we going to get the second book?" And I was just like, "I wish I could give it to you right now."
It takes as long as it takes, folks. Gosh. But
So
yeah.
that's the only reason. I just wish that it hadn't have been such a long period of time. I think it was maybe a year and a half
Hmm.
between book 1 and book 2.
Okay.
So I
Yeah,
wish I
to
could
me
have
that's
released them
not
a little.
long.
True.
To me that's
It
I
felt
mean,
long. I felt the pressure. I felt the pressure.
and I could see where, especially, because you're active on, I mean, I'm on TikTok. Um, but I'm not nearly as active or promoting as much as I know you were in developing your following and everything. Um, so to me, I mean, I'm listening to you. Trust me, I'm making mental notes. It's like, oh, gee, I'm so close to publishing, but yet I only have like the first 3 paragraphs of book 2. I was sitting in Ireland in my hotel one evening, just, and I was like, what to do, and I had the Warriors of Wrath with me, and I sat down and I was getting ready to open it up, but I felt this pull, and it's like, oh gosh, okay.
Yeah.
My
You got it.
characters are
You got to
calling.
listen to that when it
You
happens.
Absolutely. And so anyway, I opened it up and I'm like, grabbed my, and because I had a notebook and I had a pen, and it was like, I wasn't sure where things were going to start, but all of a sudden stuff just started showing up, and it was like, okay, I felt like I was transcribing,
That's
and
amazing.
yeah. And so
I love
it's
it when
like,
that happens.
yeah, yeah, it's been, and I guess that's my next, I guess we can talk about this next, but it's like, huh. So I got like a couple of paragraphs down, as far as rough idea, and um, and it kind of picks up right where everything has left off, which is necessary, I would
Mhm.
assume. But I guess my question is more to the muse standpoint. What was your experience? Did you have like a muse experience where you felt like there was just something feeding you or inspiring or um, talking to you in some form or fashion that
Well,
helped you get through everything?
I don't know if you would necessarily call it a muse, but honestly, I feel like the characters themselves got to the point that I was just so familiar with them, and it's kind of weird to because I had been writing these characters for so many years, and they almost became like people to me in my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
And um I don't know if you could kind of say they were the mute because sometimes they would do things or they would, and I'd just be like, just have to let them do. There were things that, I told you from the beginning, I knew how I wanted the story to go, but there were things that in my mind thought were going to happen differently than they actually did because it almost just seemed like the characters were doing their own thing. And it would be like that in those moments where I would be writing and I'd be like, wait a second, this isn't where I meant to go. This isn't, wait, no, stop. But I would just keep just like, uh, just following wherever they were leading. And those kind of moments did almost seem kind of, I don't want to say like out of body type things, but
Mm,
it almost was like they were writing the story instead of me, if that
yeah.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
to me it does. Trust me. Oh yeah, I've had more than my fair share of that. Uh,
Yeah.
but like in my story, my character, the reason why I've got Hong Kong behind me is that's not where I am. I'm in Virginia. Um, but I've been to Hong Kong and I have to go back to finish my research. And that's more an experiential thing. And there are people I do need to talk to for book two to really happen, but or to make it more realistic. Fantasy, you can make anything happen.
I
I get
completely
that,
understand.
but this is a real city. This is a real
Right.
location, and I want those, if it ever gets popular enough that people around the world read the book. And if someone in Hong Kong picks it up, and I do have friends in Hong Kong, if they pick it up and read it, I would like them to go, yeah, that's a real
Yeah.
something like that could actually happen here on this. Yeah, she wrote
Right.
correctly. Uh,
Yes.
um, so my in my story, my character is taken to a very special location that I refer to right now as the camp. She is driven because she's a married woman, she's two children. She is passionate about the love of her husband and her family. And he supports her, he supports her journey, and the kids are support. It's a very, we think at first it's a very healthy environment. And book two reveals a lot. Well, stuff begins to reveal itself in book one, but she does commit suicide. But she is brought back. She's reanimated. I mean, with her being, not somebody else's, but she's brought
Mhm.
back, put in her body. Um, so what was my whole point to that? Oh, her death scene. We were based off of what we were talking. I was in chapter 4, and when I was writing chapter 4, and I have a friend in Ireland who's functioning as, she's a friend, but she's a published author, and she is functioning kind of as my content editor, kind of like I bounce ideas off of her, and she's either aligning with my thought processes because she'll like say something that I've already been thinking of, or she puts a little twist on it that I'm like, can I borrow that? She's like, no, it's yours. Go ahead. And so we were talking, and it was like I was in the process of finishing up chapter 4, and I felt this urge to write her death scene. My character TK, I felt the urge to write her death scene. No, no, I'm not ready to do that yet. Days go by, the urge gets a little stronger. Not ready to do that. The urge gets every day. The urge. So by the time I finished chapter 4, it was like, all right, already. I'll do it. And I calculated out, okay, what's going to happen in chapter 5? All right, then. So maybe in that's when she gets abducted or whatever. And then in chapter 6, that's when I thought it would be chapter 6. It's now currently sitting at chapter 13. But
Yeah.
I went and I wrote chapter 6 and then
Yeah.
began chapter 7.
Yeah.
And it was like when that was done, I felt like I could breathe. The urgency was done. And I went and started chapter 5, and I'm sitting there going, where are they? It's like, where, and all I got was, you don't need us for this. You've got this. Just take it and go. So it was like, but it was a very real absence that I felt, which was bizarre, or at least different for me. So, because there was something there that just pushed me, whether it was my higher self or what, or the characters, I don't know. But
Mhm.
it's so, yeah, I can absolutely identify with. And one scene I was writing, I have a 9-year-old, which is her son. His name's Douglas. I was writing one of the scenes with him in it. And again, like you were saying, it was going in a direction. And I'm like, wait, hold,
Yeah.
stop. And so I just sort of turned. I know he's not there, and no, I didn't see him. But I just turned and I'm like, I kind of pretended in my mind that he was there. So I wasn't talking just to air, but I was in my mind, I was talking
Yes.
to him.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm like, Douglas, is this what you want? Is this how you want it to go? And he was like, yeah, this is what I want you to do. And I'm like, we'll try it. If I don't like it, we're going to go back to what I wanted. And it's in.
Exactly.
It's in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, that
I
is.
I can't tell you how many times I had that same thought of like, well, if we'll write it. If we don't like it, we can always delete it and go back and
Yep.
start over again.
Absolutely. So I don't know if you want to spend a couple of minutes and talk about this different genre that you're working on, or
Yeah, so I as of right now, I think I would say I'm probably about halfway through the story. Um, I think it would probably be classified as like a thriller, maybe a contemporary mystery. I'm not sure exactly. Depends on how it ends. um, which I don't know. So that's the difference between my first 2 books and this book. Those were completely planned out. I knew in my mind before I started writing, I was like, okay, this is the, kind of like tribulation type period that I want to write. Um, and so I kind of knew I had a format. With this one, completely started writing chapter 1, and I had the idea, and I'll tell you where I got the idea in a second, but and so you can kind of get an idea of where the story, what kind of a story it's going to be. But there were so many times, and I just thought it was so funny. I think I maybe even texted or emailed my editor at one point and was like, I have no idea what's going on, because, and I mean, I'm writing it and things would happen, and I'd be like, oh, she's mad for some reason, and just not even like, but it's almost like Well, it was kind of the same way with the first one. You asked me if I followed a format,
Mm-hmm.
like plot points and things like that. I
Right.
did
Yeah.
not. Um, I tried to do that. Well, let me just finish this thought. I'm gonna go three different tangents. Um, it's not. I'm kind of pantsing it now. I did get to a point where I was like, okay, I have to know how this is going to end because I have to know what I'm writing to.
Right.
But the first probably 11 chapters, I really didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know which direction I was going to go with the story. But the idea came to me. I think I was listening to a true crime podcast, and they were talking about um, just recent headlines, like mysterious type of headlines that had been in the news recently, and they were talking about this man who, and you could probably Google it. I mean, I did after I listened to the episode. I went to like read the headline, and it was about this man who disappeared. He was missing for like 5 years. Um, and he just turns up one day, um, back at home with the same clothes he was wearing when he left. And
Interesting.
he has no memory of where he's been. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing story. Where's he been? What's been going on? Like, what happened to him? I think in the actual story, it maybe was a older man, and there really wasn't a conclusion to where he had been. The family still doesn't know, but people were like, maybe he has Alzheimer's, like maybe he
Mm-hmm.
just got lost. But then there's the whole thing of like he's wearing the same clothes that he had on when he left. Anyway, so you could see all the different directions that could
Yeah.
go.
Yes.
So I started writing chapter one, and I was just like, let's see what I can come up with, and I just kept writing and kept writing and kept writing, and so that's why I say I'm not sure how it's going to be. Really depends on how it ends, uh, which I still don't know. I kind of have an idea. I don't want to take it sci-fi. I toyed with that idea. Maybe he was
Right.
abducted by aliens. But
Aliens, the Fae. I mean,
yeah,
there's all
yeah,
kinds
yeah,
of other
yeah.
dimensions. He walked through a gate, a portal.
Well, I will tell you, I decided when I finished book two, I did tell myself I am not building another world right now. Like that's what took a lot of time. That's why it took me so long to write my first book, because you're building a whole system of from the ground up.
Yes.
It's not like this story. I think I've written, and I'm not going to say it's been a quick process, because I've again just been taking breaks here and there. Other things going on in life, and you just kind of like, well, and I work full time,
Right. So,
unfortunately. So I don't get as much time to write as I would like to, but um, I kind of forgot where I was going with that.
building worlds, not
Yes.
building worlds. Um,
Yes. So it has been, the story has come to me faster because I'm not having to worry about things like how are they talking to each other? How are they getting from place to place? How are they, what are the rules of this world? Because it's
right.
just set in the real world. So that's kind of why I decided not to go any like sci-fi or fantasy with it, because I was like, I want to be able to see where it goes, and not have to worry about that kind of stuff this
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah. And plus, the one thing that hits me when you're creating a world, um, even when you're not, you've got to make sure your points match up. That something you've written in chapter 2 is the same if you're bringing it up in chapter 20, it measures out. It's equal. It's not contradictory.
exactly,
It's like I
exactly.
found myself a couple of times going, oh wait, pulling up the chapter, reading through, finding it, and going, Phew, it was that way. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah, there was a couple of times I had to kind of fix things, because I mean, once book 1 was published, that's another thing, that's another reason why I thought, "Ooh, if only I had waited, I could this would have made this so much easier because I could have just gone back and typed a sentence or 2 in this chapter, and it would have answered this question, but now I gotta write a whole chapter."
yes, yes.
Or, something that could have easily been done, but it breaks this rule, like, so.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, you,
yes, that's a huge thing to think about when you're writing a fantasy or you're building a world of any kind. You gotta stick to those rules.
yeah. How did you, because mine is a obviously fictional, fantasy, martial arts, mystical adventure. Obviously, martial arts means there's going to be fighting, there's going to be battles. And in yours, both books have got a few conflicts in them, with one
Right,
major conflict evolving the whole time. But
right.
so how that I think when you were on TikTok, before writing book 1, you were really like, how do I, how
Stressing
do you write
about.
a fight scene?
I remember, I don't know how far back it was, but I do remember making um, a TikTok after the book was out, just talking about how much I hated every fight scene. Oh, and I hope I never have to write one ever again in my life. I dreaded it so much. I would write the story and I'd be like, okay, there's going to be a fight scene here, and I'd just keep writing, and
Yeah.
because I would put it off and until I absolutely had to go back and write it. But was your question, how did I?
Yeah, how did you because I know with mine I got very I got almost instructional. Like I said, my profession is technical writing. I have obtained in my earlier years, I have obtained, studied Taekwondo and trained and have obtained black belt level. But so technique, you know, I found myself writing my fight scenes more technically oriented of how they flipped out I got too descriptive, so I had to go back and really scale that back to being very generalized. And they threw a punch versus a back fist or something along those lines. And when I was reading Warriors of Wrath, it was I felt like the way you described your fight scenes was very natural and very, it left me as the reader to visualize what that looked like.
Mhm.
And I realized my mistake was I was telling the reader, what they had to see. And so,
That might have just been kind of laziness on my part.
no, I
Trying to
was way too descriptive. I mean, if I was writing an instructional manual, sure, fine, good, but
I,
no.
I was trying to write those scenes in as little of words as I possibly could. I wish I would have gone back and kind of read one. It's been a while since I've read those stories, because I'm not sure exactly. I might have just blocked it out of my mind because it was so terrible to write. Um, I honestly, I mean, I feel like as much as I procrastinated doing it, once I got into the right mind frame of like, okay, I've got to write this scene.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like I did an okay job. I mean, I appreciate you saying that. Um, but I feel like so what I did, I can remember because I'm kind of like picturing a scene in my mind, something that happens in the book, and I think all I did was just kind of like try to, almost like a movie, it's playing out in my mind. I'm seeing what they're doing, and I know they've got to be. Sometimes they're talking to each other as they're fighting, and so
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of work the dialogue in with their actions and things. Um, but honestly, I wish I had a better answer to give you because um, I I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing. But I would just rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it until I felt like it sounded good.
Well, I'm not complaining. I mean, especially I mean, both of them are good. And everything flowed. Everything
That's what I
flowed.
tried. I tried to make sure of that. Like I tried to make sure that the reader could visualize just like I was
Mm-hmm.
in my mind what was happening. Um, I do remember kind of watching a lot of fight scenes, movie fight scenes,
Mm-hmm.
more along the lines of like the Avengers type stuff, like superhero type, because that's kind of the fight scenes you're seeing in the story. It's not just like two people duking
Yeah.
it out on the street.
Yeah.
You've got angels and
Yes.
using weapons and um, so I would watch those movies to try to get inspiration of that
Mm-hmm.
sort, and
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like that helped a lot. It helped me to to understand what needs to happen, because I think that's the thing I struggled with. I've never been in a fight with anyone.
That's a good
Obviously,
thing.
yeah, I don't know how these, and then to try to write it out, the whole process. But but that did help. And then reading other finding other inspiration from other authors who've done it and done a good job of it. So
Yes. No. Yeah. I would. I mean, I'm gonna say that I did read this your second one because I'm deep in, like my book's written, I'm deep into the revision part of it. So um I did take inspiration because you've got a lot of conflict and fight going on in this one, because everything is hitting, everything is
yeah,
culminating. You're saving the world or you're not saving the world, one of the two.
right.
And so with your characters, you want to give the characters, talk about who your characters are briefly. I mean, you've got Cameron, you got Ethan, they're the two main characters, but you also have the angelic realm. um, but Ethan gets seriously wounded, which, and then they escape into an apartment, and you don't know if he's going to live or die, and then you're learning as things are getting revealed about this prophecy that they can't die. It's like, I can't kill you, but I can make you hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I found inspiration on how to cut back what I had written in my fight scenes, and I've got a whole lot more in the next book to write. So yeah, the
Well,
reading other people's work is helpful.
that's one thing and again, this might just be my inexperience when I first started. I was just like, "Ooh, let's see what I can do." Um, I don't do well with a book that has a lot of description. You start out, just with a lot of ex exponent. What is it called? Exposition. um, And I had some of my beta readers, you know, when other people finally started reading it, they would be like, I heard this from more than one person. Just they're like, "Oh well, dang, we're just getting right into it." I'm like, "Well, I mean, this is the story." um, and so I did. That is one thing I had to go back and add descriptions of places, settings, descriptions of characters because I was just like, I'm just writing what's happening. I'm not getting into a lot of. I have the opposite problem of you. I think I underwrite,
Ah, okay.
and then I have to go back and add later because I'm just like I just want to talk about what's happening. I don't want to. Um, but once I got into it, you know, you just kind of have to put yourself in the mind place of like, okay, what am I seeing? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What's going on around them? And just
Yeah.
it got easier as I went along. And when I finally realized, okay, this is something people are going to have questions about when they're reading the book, I probably need to go ahead and answer those questions. So,
Yeah. Well, the one question I have for you is, how do you pronounce the name of the primary antagonist?
Apollyon?
Yeah.
Apollyon? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I did have it kind of right.
That's how I pronounce it.
That works. That works. It was like I wasn't I mean, it looked, yeah, I focused on the Apollo and then add the Eon, Apollyon. I mean, that's how I
Yes.
was, but
Yes. Yeah.
it took me a little while to get to that. I had it probably pronouncing it all over the place, but by the end of the book, that's where I was at. It was like, let's just stick with one name and let's go with this.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that a lot with characters that I'm not sure how to pronounce their name. I'm just like, this is what I'm calling them.
Right, right. And let's just hope, yeah, I'm not going to say
Yeah.
anything. But yeah, I found him, I just, the way, I just encourage everybody, go read this. If you want a nice, light, it actually, like your first book, I will honestly say, your first book, Fate of the Fallen, I would read every night going to bed. It took me a week, but that's, because I'm working full time, I'm
Oh, yeah.
writing, and then I would settle in before going to sleep and read this. And yeah, it was a struggle to put the book down every night. And there was one time where I couldn't put it down, and I found myself just like I was at some point where I like it. I would call it a page turner. I just needed to read to see what was coming next, to see what's going to unfold. And, so that really, that was a good experience. And, yeah, this one kept me up. I told you earlier, this one kept me up on a Saturday. I started at 9, around 9:30 at night in the living room, transitioned to my bed at by 11:30, and then just kept reading and made a notation in my head somewhere in the middle that I'm turning pages and I'm reading and I'm not dozing off and I'm not feeling tired, and I would stop reading when I did. And it was like by the third or fourth nod, I was like, okay, it's time to put the bookmark in and close the book. When I put the book down and looked at my phone, it was 4 a.m. Thank you for the journey. Okay.
I actually had a friend tell me, a friend that I work with one day at work, she said, I almost had to call into work today because I was up all night reading your book.
Yep,
Like,
it's
that's a compliment.
yes, yes, absolutely. I've got so many people at work who are saying, "Oh, just tell me when it's ready. Tell me when it's ready. I want to buy it."
I was going to ask, do you have a plan of that? I mean, I'm excited to read it. So
Ah, well, my plan is I'm going to handle this like it's going to be the biggest thing ever.
good.
Because, if you don't shoot for the sun, you're not going to make it to the moon or to the stars.
Right. Right.
So, it could fall on its tail and go nowhere, or it could become whatever it becomes. It
Yeah.
depends, you know. It's like my friend in Ireland said, um, oh, I can't even think of the author's name. Worst case scenario, she's like, Kat, the worst case scenario is, that vampire story. It could do as poorly as that vampire story,
Oh,
which we all, um, because vampires don't glitter. But anyway,
right.
and that she has a large fan base. But
Right.
many people in the literary world consider it not a good book, not good stuff. But yet, had a TV series. It did very well.
Right.
So
Right.
she's
Right.
like, I mean,
Like what is success?
exactly, exactly. So, um, I'm hoping for to release it. No, 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 no. I am going to be releasing in 2025.
Okay.
Okay. Um, the hope is it's going to be in the first quarter. So maybe by March, I will actually have physical copies ready to go. It could take into the second quarter of the year. Cannot take any, I refuse to allow it to take any longer than that. But it goes the way it does. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know how things are going to go.
Right.
But I woke up just quickly, briefly to share my story. I woke up one morning. I was actually a part of a fan club for a particular martial artist action hero back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had just gotten or was getting ready to go to South Korea to test for my first degree black belt. And so the fan club was joking around about, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if we met in Hong Kong and got to tour the various sites and stuff. And, so one evening, I went to sleep with that. And when I woke, and this has never happened to me before, and when I woke up, I had a complete storyline.
Wow.
So,
That's
but that
awesome.
was the storyline for book one. And then I realized after I written it and I wrote it after I written the story, the synopsis, um, then I realized that the end of book one is a cliffhanger. So there has to be a book two because people are want to know what happened.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
she or didn't she? What did she do? Because there was a decision she had to make. So that's when I realized I know I have a two booker. Potentially it could be a three, but I don't think I want to get into that. So I'm going to try and write book two to where, kind of like yours, you conclude it, but there's still various avenues it could go in.
Right. Right.
Whether you build that world or not is totally your choice, but that's the end of it, you
Right.
know.
Right. Right. Right.
So, yeah, she gets whisked. She goes to Hong Kong, meets up with her friends. She disappears. There are things I call the shadow people that have been visiting her, visiting the family in Virginia. And apparently they had stopped for like 6 months and they had just started back up again. And this is like the night before she leaves, or that, that she's telling her husband that the shadow people are back. And
Mhm.
he feels very cautious about it and he's trying to convince her not to go, but he doesn't want to cause a fight. He lets her go. And yeah, the worst happens. She disappears.
Yeah.
So most of the book is, it takes, I think it's chapter 6 that she just finally disappears, but there's so much going on between 1 and 6. I mean, there's still value in reading 1 through 6, and there's stuff. One person said, no, you should get rid of this, and this. And my content editor is like, no, they're missing the whole story. Because it's
Yeah.
about her finding herself.
Right.
She's a victim. She's been a victim. and she's not really living her true essence, and she's not really in touch. It turns out she's not really in touch with her true self.
Yeah.
So, which is what one of the reasons why this writing a blurb for my book is so difficult, because that's a whole topic some on another day. But because there's that primary storyline, and there's the subtle underneath twists and turns that take place, the turbulence.
Right.
Um, and then it's like, will she make it back to her husband and her family in Virginia, or does she have to just walk on into this new life that she was abducted to? Because when she gets abducted, she wakes up in the 19th century, or what she believes is the 19th century. And this story starts out in 2016.
Wow. That sounds really
So,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's so the journey is there. And when she comes back, if she comes back, what that's where book 2 would come in, because it would explain how it affected her marriage and her kids and life and death situations, and there's just a whole lot of white
Yeah.
knuckle through the book. So
Yeah.
anyway, so
Yeah.
how can
Stories like yours and mine, it's like you could keep writing forever. Like, there's always going to be that
yeah
adventure, that excitement, that, but like you said, I don't know if we're recording or not, but
yeah
it's
we're
good to
still
have a little bit of mystery at the end.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah yes, yours definitely has some mystery, but and it was like, I wonder if she'll do a third, and then it was like, no, she shouldn't.
Yeah.
There, because we should finish that.
Right.
We
Exactly.
should
Yeah.
be, use your imagination, folks. Go read this, go read the set, and maybe come back and watch this again. But yeah, it just, the
Right.
way you leave it, it's, there's potential for it to go in any direction, and it's whatever we decide in our
Right.
minds that happens
Right. Right.
so, which is awesome. So people want to reach you, how can they, where can they follow you, where can they navigate to your web page to purchase a book, or
So my website is aewinstead.com. Most of my socials are AE Winstead Books, other than Twitter, at which I'm not active on Twitter. I mean,
yeah
I might post a picture a couple of times a year, but it's just AE_Winstead on Twitter, or X now.
yeah
But um, I think that's it. Yeah.
okay
And
okay
then my book, you can order signed copies on my website, or just if you just want they're a little bit cheaper on Amazon. Um, you could just, you can find them there too.
okay awesome. Well,
I appreciate you having me chit
I
chat this afternoon.
I appreciate you taking the time. It's it's not your fault. I was already writing before we met, but I had been on a huge hiatus. So, but yes, I needed to thank you in some form or fashion. And if my book becomes awesome or just a blip on the map, either way, I got it done. It's going to go to, I am self-publishing, that I am certain of, and but I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being out there on TikTok. I want to thank you for being so connectable and so human. So just you are a joy to follow, and your work is worthy of being read, and I think it would make a great movie. So I hope somebody
That's a lot
sees
of high
this.
compliments right there.
I hope somebody sees this and reaches out.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I mean, taking the time out of your day to help do that for me. Yeah.
Well, it's the least I can do. It's as much as I know I can do for now. And I'm envisioning my book doing really well, and being on stage talking to somebody and going, yeah, Amanda Winstead, man, she got me. She pulled me back. My characters must have gone and helped navigate the universe to navigate me to find her on TikTok, and it's all her fault. But she's got, I mean, hopefully book 3 will get out and I'll enjoy that, and we'll continue this relationship
Yes,
onward and upward, and
of
maybe I'll
course.
see you at the Oscars someday.
Of course. That's
Dream,
amazing. Yes.
yeah,
I am claiming it and believing it with you.
all right, all right. And that's where I'm at. It's if I know I may sound bizarre, I may sound out there, but if you don't dream it, you can't pursue it, and you can't achieve it.
That's exactly
So
right. That is exactly right.
so that's definitely on that. All right, I'm going to end the video at this point. So thank you, everybody, and go ahead, check out Amanda, and go ahead, give her a follow, but better yet, go buy her books. You will not be disappointed.